My good friend Sebastian Gorka joins me now. We're going to be talking the New York City terror attack, Mueller's imploding investigation, and the Trump administration's all-out counteroffensive on fake news. We saw another terror attack in New York City yesterday, and when these incidents happen, these low-tech asymmetric attacks, there are few people more knowledgeable than my good friend, Dr. Sebastian Gorka. He joins me now. Seb, I want to jump right in. We had another terror attack yesterday, one that could have been far, far worse, far more deadly. During the very, very busy Christmas season in New York City, at the very, very busy Port Authority terminal, 27-year-old from Bangladesh who'd lived in the U.S. 7 years, attempted to detonate a pipe bomb that was on his body. He was a suicide bomber. Luckily, the device malfunctioned. But what really bothers me is that we've eradicated the intelligence programs, the grassroots intelligence programs, the confidential informants in mosques, the undercover detectives, NYPD detectives infiltrating radical Muslim groups. We eradicated these programs essentially the day Bill de Blasio was inaugurated in January 2014, programs that we know saved lives. And we're seeing the results of that. 6 weeks ago, a truck attack in downtown Manhattan. A Muslim terrorist, an adherent of ISIS, ran over a bunch of people, killed several. Yesterday, we see another ISIS-inspired terrorist try to blow up dozens, if not hundreds of people in the Port Authority terminal. And we found out as well, one of the things that's even more troubling than any of this to me, that we found out that one of the people who was instrumental in crafting the NYPD's new response to all this, the NYPD eradicating the demographics unit and eradicating the profiling and monitoring programs, was none other than Linda Sarsour. So where do we go from here, Seb? We've got liberal local administrations following the path of political correctness over public safety. Where do we go? Is it a federal response, or do we have to just keep on these local officials until they start seeing things clearly?
Well, look, as a former NYPD officer yourself, you know that despite the insanity of the political correctness being driven down by the mayor's office onto the police department, the good men and women that wear the cloth of the Republic or the cloth of the NYPD do the job that needs to be done. So they understand what good counterterrorism is.
Yes.
It's not just about community outreach or really reaching out to fake representatives of the Muslim population, such as Linda Sarsour. It's really about human intelligence. As Americans, we love our technology, but signals intelligence, decryption of terrorist use of emails only gets you so far. And the NYPD understood after 9/11 that the federal government had not served it well. As a result, they turned the NYPD into literally one of the world's best counterterrorism organizations. And a pillar of that was the undercover assets that they put in place in the various communities to identify the terrorists before they go kinetic, because good counterterrorism is not reactive, it is preventative. So I expect the good men and women of the NYPD to do what needs to be done. But we need to see happen in New York what really happened on January the 20th here in Washington on Inauguration Day. We had a commander-in-chief take the oath of office who is very clear that political correctness gets people killed, and he will not permit political correctness to drive either the threat assessments that are at the core of our national security infrastructure, or the policies that respond to those threat assessments. So, look, there's an old saying, every population deserves the politicians it elects. New York chose Mayor de Blasio. Let's hope that his political correctness doesn't cost lives.
Seb, I'm so glad you just brought that up, because you had said something, and I absolutely loved it. I think it was yesterday or the day before on Fox News or Fox Business. You said something to the effect that President Trump is the kryptonite to political correctness. It was absolutely outstanding, and it was so spot on. But you make some great points about our first responders, and let's talk about heroism for a second. Let's talk about the men and women of the NYPD and the Port Authority PD. I saw one of the most heroic things I've ever seen right after this attack failed, when New York City police department officers and Port Authority police department officers tackled a suspect They didn't know if he had redundant explosive devices. They shielded innocents with their own bodies. They got on top of this suspect. They put him on the ground. They immobilized him while they were evacuating the terminal, putting their bodies between the terrorist murderer, the savage terrorist, and innocents. If that's not heroism, I don't know what is. And, the rank and file of the NYPD, they know these programs work. They know these programs are highly effective at weeding out the bad guys, especially the people who work in counterterror and intelligence, because they also know that an attack like this, a low-tech asymmetric attack like this, can be plotted and carried out across a kitchen table in an apartment. There isn't a whole heck of a lot of chatter to be intercepted, if any chatter at all. So that's why, in my opinion, and why I kept harping yesterday when I did a hit on Fox Business about the intelligence component, the need for these confidential informants and these undercovers, why I kept harping about that grassroots intelligence component. That is really the difference between getting in front of these attacks and being reactive to these attacks. Is it not?
Absolutely, absolutely. So, look, I am very. I basically hate the phrase lone wolf terrorism. I think that was invented or made popular by the last administration to make U.S. citizens disconnect the dots. So we've very rarely seen, except pathetic cases like Jihadi Jane, we've rarely seen cases of significant danger where one individual alone was responsible for a significant plot or a significant attack. But even if it's a small group of people, one bomb maker, or one indoctrinator and the person executing the attack, you're never going to find all of those purely through technical means. It simply doesn't happen.
Right.
We have end-to-end encrypted commercial communications systems that you can download in many cases for free. So it's almost impossible to intercept all of these technically. And as a result, at the end of the day, this is a form of irregular warfare. And whether you're doing irregular warfare on the streets of Fallujah or Northern Ireland, or whether you're doing it in Brooklyn, at the end of the day, your very best asset is the human being that is part of that community, that penetrates that community, that sees the signs, the flags of somebody going down the path of jihadism, and then can bring the authorities to bear on that individual prior to them building the device, prior to them stealing that truck and then mowing down people on a bicycle path. So yes, absolutely, we have to go back to the old school. Whether you're working against Cosa Nostra, the mafia, or whether it's global jihadism, human intelligence is the key.
Seb, I'm really glad you brought that up, because this is a point I raise not only on my show here, pretty much every time I talk about profiling and monitoring, but I do it on hits on other media outlets. There is century-long precedent with regards to profiling and monitoring in law enforcement. Look, I'm an Italian-American guy in my 40s. When law enforcement looks at La Cosa Nostra, the Italian mob, they profile guys like me. And I want them to profile guys like me because I fit the profile of a mobster, right? I'm an Italian guy in my 40s. I'm who you should be looking at. But there's a line of Italian-American detectives and cops and federal agents who want to work in the units that track La Cosa Nostra. No one finds that ethnically discriminatory or xenophobic. We do it to blacks. When we look at the Bloods and the Crips, we profile black gangs, and black detectives and agents line up. You get into those units. We do it with Hispanics. We profile Mexicans and Colombians. When we look at narcotics activity, we profile Asians. We look at Asian gang activity. But it's only xenophobic. It's only racist. It's only racist if we apply the same sound law enforcement precedents to Muslims. And look, the NYPD's been doing this for 100+ years with regards to La Cosa Nostra. There were Italian-American detectives infiltrating the mob at the turn of the century. So are we really going to just disregard 100 years of proven, effective law enforcement precedent because it offends liberals?
Yeah, let's just be very, very clear on this point. Profiling is not a pejorative word.
Exactly.
Profiling is a synonym for common sense. If you've got an APB that a bank robbery just occurred, and the person who committed the bank robbery is 6'5", Caucasian with blonde hair, you don't put out an APB for a 5-foot-tall black grandmother. We have certain jurisdictions, and I'm not going to name them right now, but we have certain jurisdictions not far from where I live, where when an intelligence report about a potential terrorist threat comes into a fusion center, it must be stripped. It must be stripped of any descriptors that refer to somebody perhaps looking Arabic or Middle Eastern.
So ridiculous.
Removed.
Ridiculous.
How do we keep people safe like that? It's insane.
It is insane. It's a great way to phrase it, Seb, because in law enforcement, I mean, literally from day one in the academy, you're taught that your career, potentially your freedom, you might be criminally charged, but everything depends on you accurately identifying suspects and acting constitutionally within the confines of that accurate information. So it's just mind-blowing to me that liberals want us to have these vague descriptions. They would rather us misidentify and stop 100 of the wrong people rather than use proper descriptions that might indicate a race or a religion or an ethnicity and risk offending the sensibilities of one. But, you know, the talk about accurate information and ethics in law enforcement dovetails very, very nicely with where I want to go next. Really need to jump in and talk about Mueller. Now, it seemed like about once a week, we were getting information that there was a conflict of interest or some type of alleged corruption within Mueller's camp. Then it seemed in the last week or two like it was every day. Well, now it seems like this information, this negative information on Mueller is coming every hour. I mean, it sure seems to me like it's every hour. The latest bombshell dropped by James Rosen at Fox News is that Bruce Orr, the DOJ official who was demoted for interacting with Christopher Steele and Fusion GPS with regards to that fake news Trump-Russia collusion dossier, well, it turns out Christopher Orr's wife worked for Fusion GPS while the dossier was being created. And she worked on Russia-related matters. Now, they won't confirm or deny whether or not she had anything to do with the dossier, but I'm leaning towards she probably did. She, at the very least, knew about it. So the question is, what in the world is going on at the Department of Justice? Look, I talk to cops and prosecutors all day long, cops of local, state, and federal levels. All of them agree that if this was an investigation that any of them worked on, I can say if it was an investigation that I worked on, it would have been shut down long ago for the mere appearance of impropriety. But Mueller seems to operate with impunity, seems to be able to do whatever he wants, which begs other questions. And people, especially in the Trump base, are very concerned, and they ask, what is Attorney General Jeff Sessions doing? It appears that he's completely checked out, that he's MIA, that he's turned the Department of Justice over to Rod Rosenstein, who in turn turned it over to Robert Mueller. It seems like Mueller acts without oversight. He can do whatever he wants, spend as much money as he wants, go after anybody he wants, and ethics, the rule of law, and due process be damned. So you always tell people when you speak publicly, count to 10, take a breath, everything's going to be okay. What are we on the outside? People that don't have your intimate knowledge of what's happening inside the White House, those personal relationships, what are we missing here, Seb?
No, I think we've come to a crescendo moment, absolutely. We cannot go another day in the news cycle without hearing one more fatally compromised aspect of the Mueller team being uncovered, right. Whether it's individuals who are in breach of the Hatch Act with political activity, individuals that went to Clinton's prospective celebration party on election night, or whether it's individuals whose wives worked for Fusion GPS, the company that created the dodgy dossier built around Russian propaganda to take down Donald Trump as a presidential candidate. It's got to a point where you're absolutely right. It's not just the issue of this investigation. It's the question of the probity, the overall probity of federal law enforcement. Comey was bad enough in terms of undermining the reputation of the FBI. Yeah. But now we have this DOJ sanctioned witch hunt of individuals who have no place investigating anybody, let alone an individual from the other party that they have been clearly committed to undermining in their own personal and public activities. So, yes, look, I'm not inside the system anymore. I have ties to the White House and other places in the federal administration. But I think we're at a crescendo moment and something has to give. Whether it comes from Jeff Sessions himself, whether it comes from the president, it has to come right now. And I like to remind everybody. I like to remind the DNC. I like to remind the New York Times, Washington Post, and CNN. In our constitutional system, the Chief Law Enforcement Officer of the United States is not the director of the FBI, nor is it the Attorney General, Jeff Sessions. The Chief Law Enforcement Officer of the United States is somebody called the President. And right now, that's Donald J. Trump. So he has every right to clean house, and maybe very soon he will.
I love that you always say that. You're one of the few people who gets that right, that the president, not the attorney general, is the chief law enforcement officer of the United States. And every time you say it, I always retweet you because it's such an important distinction and it really kills that fake news, that false narrative on the left that the president has no right to intervene in Department of Justice investigations or to comment on them or to be briefed on them. It's so ridiculous. He's the commander in chief, not just of the military, but of all of our federal law enforcement agencies. That's an executive branch function. Now, you train FBI agents. You've told me thousands of FBI agents in your career. And I speak to agents daily, and it's very, very sad because the feedback I'm getting from the agents, and I want to stress that when we talk about problems inside the FBI, we're talking about a few bad actors at the top of the agency. 99.999% of the street agents are very hardworking men and women doing their job very bravely with integrity. The 2 points of feedback I get, and I've been getting for quite a while, and I suspect you have too, but I want to see if it's consistent, is that number one, they're concerned for their ability to do their job, and in some cases their safety, because their credential, their ID isn't worth what it used to be worth. I mean, what's the incentive for a wise guy, a La Cosa Nostra capo, to be compliant with the FBI, to cooperate with the FBI, if FBI bosses aren't cooperating with the law? I had one guy tell me, I could walk into a mafia social club and they're going to tell me, hey, why do I got to deal with you? Your own bosses are breaking the law. Who are you to come? Where's your moral authority? Where's your ethical authority? I'm probably phrasing a little bit more professionally than a wise guy would, but you get the point. And then number two, it's just a sheer morale killer. Now, I get that Director Wray, when he spoke to Congress, Christopher Wray, had to say that he sees morale at the FBI and everybody's doing a great job and everybody's happy. He had to say that. But when I speak to the agents, they tell me that morale is at an all-time low because they've spent 10, 12, 15, 17 years working their fingers to the bone, doing their job right, doing everything by the book, following the law, following the rules. And now they're tarnished. They've got to be embarrassed to say what they do for a living because of a few bad actors with political motivations, left-leaning political motivations at the top of the agency. Are you hearing the same from the agents you speak to?
I heard this very, very early on. I don't know if we discussed this already, but I'll say it again, even if we have. Yeah. When James Comey gave his infamous press conference, in which the first 13 minutes of it was a slam dunk case against indicting Hillary Clinton for the mishandling of classified information. And then in the last minute, the 14th minute, he arrogated the rights of the Attorney General onto himself and said, well, I'm not going to recommend prosecution. And he did a 180. I was told by a member of the JTTF in New York, the Joint Terrorism Task Force, that his office was watching that live. And for 13 minutes, they were, pumping the air, saying, yes, he's going to recommend prosecution, and this person is going to rightfully pay the price for what she did. And when he did the 180 in the last minute, half of the agents, the federal agents, half of the FBI agents, and this was on a Tuesday, if I recall, or a Wednesday, when he basically whitewashed the Clinton server scandal. Half of the agents in that JTTF stood up, put on their jackets, and left the office, and didn't come back till next Monday. Now think about that. Think about what that means for the morale of the FBI. Half of the agents simply left the building because of what their director had done for political purposes. We have to have a historic perspective. The FBI hasn't always had the reputation it had. For the last 20 years, it's had a sterling reputation,
Great
a superb reputation.
Yeah.
But let's remember J. Edgar Hoover. Let's remember what they had to recover from. Unfortunately, a few people on the 7th floor have brought it back to that level of the COINTELPRO, the depths of the reputation of the FBI being really sinking to as deep as it can. I've met thousands of the IAs, SOSs, and the agents of the FBI, and I've trained them on counterterrorism issues. And I was proud to do so. But how those individuals now clip on their badge, pick up their creds, and put on their handgun every day, and then think about what their brand means after just the last 6 months, I would not like to be in their position.
You and I are of like mind on the FBI. That's pretty clear. I think we're hearing the same things from agents, and I agree that the agency can recover. Let's get right into Jeff Sessions, because I would be remiss if I didn't dig deep in this. There are a lot of questions, especially from people on social media. Many of the same people interact with you and I, and they're upset. The base is very, very upset. So what is it about Jeff Sessions? Has he checked out? Is he compromised? I don't think he's compromised. The guy's been in the game a long time, but I have to ask that question. Is he compromised? Is he overwhelmed? Did he get there and say, man, things are much worse than I ever thought they were? Or was he a guy that existed in the Senate, that existed inside the system, inside the establishment status quo for so long, that he doesn't think it's as bad as the rest of us do? I mean, what's going on with Attorney General Sessions? Because you know this, you engage people quite often on social media. You're out there in traditional media every day, many times a day. You hear the same frustrations I do. But again, you have this deeper insight. You understand the players. You personally know them. You still speak to them. What is going on with Jeff Sessions? Is he a good guy who's overwhelmed? Or is he somebody we shouldn't trust that should have been replaced last week?
No, I mean, I sometimes read, well, one shouldn't do this too often, but I sometimes read the comments on right-wing websites, and the person who gets the most, I mean, it's not Hillary who gets pilloried the most. It's unfortunately the Attorney General.
It is.
I made a promise to the president when I resigned from the White House that I wouldn't attack individual members of the cabinet, and I'm going to stick to that.
Yeah.
But I will say I don't think he's checked out, and I don't think that he's compromised. From my interactions with him in the White House, I do truly think that this is an honorable man who, for whatever reason, may be spending too much time in the Senate, where individual senators are respected and powerful individuals in the city. I don't think he knew what he was getting into when he volunteered to become the Attorney General. I've seen on his face immense frustration when it came to the question of leaking out of the White House. And he should be frustrated. It's his job to stop the leaking from the White House. So I think you're absolutely right. I hate conspiracy theories. I find them entertaining, but there's a reason they're called theories. There isn't a massive web of people undermining the United States Republic. But there is a culture of business as usual. And more than that, these are individuals who think they're unbiased, but in fact, their de facto setting is to the left. And I just want to raise one point. It wasn't me. It might have been Hannity or somebody else. Everybody who's getting in trouble in the FBI or the DOJ for the last 2 years, they're not getting in trouble because of their Republican view.
But that's just it, right? Right? The FBI, the intelligence community, was never weaponized on behalf of Donald Trump. It was never weaponized on behalf of outsider insurgent candidates. It was done exclusively for Democrats, more specifically, exclusively for Hillary Clinton. I mean, these FBI agents at the top of the agencies, these DOJ officials, appear to have totally breached protocol, totally breached policy, ignored their oath, and weaponized their trusted positions to legitimize fake news in an effort to steal an election from a constitutionally elected president, Donald Trump. And thank God for new media. Thank God for social media. I want to give thanks to groups like Judicial Watch, who file their FOIA requests and file lawsuits. Outlets like The Rebel. Without all of us collectively, without people like you, Seb, who are willing to go out there and speak up and speak really loudly, they might have gotten away with this. Look, this happened in the Bush administration. The media treated Bush horribly, but his communications team was very milquetoast. They did very little to push back. It wasn't as bad as it is with Trump, but what they're doing to Donald Trump is a travesty. It's criminal, possibly literally criminal now. But man, if we didn't have new and alternative media to get the word out, and had Hillary Clinton been elected, I can't think of how bad things might have been.
Even under the Bush administration, a Democrat-leaning bureaucrat could do very nicely for himself.
Yes.
Okay, but now that's not the case. Now the rank outsider from Queens has come in and he's busting up the monopoly or the fake monopoly on truth that the swamp thinks that they have a right to maintain. So yes, I think it's the worst we've ever seen it for decades.
Such a great way to start winding down the segment, because I adore the president's communication style as a guy from Queens myself. I grew up maybe 4 or 5 neighborhoods east of where the president grew up. So I get it. He sounds like my friends' dads, like mine. He sounds like my friends and me sometimes. And it works. That's a very effective communication style. And that's why the truck driver, the plumber, the cop, the firefighter, the welder, the people that build America, the core, the grassroots, the salt of the earth, the working people really adore this president. Because he doesn't condescend to them. He doesn't speak down to them. He sounds like them. And they really appreciate that he speaks to them without trying to be too presidential, right? He's just one guy talking to another, one guy talking to a soccer mom, one guy talking to a working guy. And it works. And it really, really works. And I also just adore Sarah Huckabee Sanders. She's a rock star in the press room, especially when she spanks down the Jim Acostas of the world. I mean, how dare Sarah Huckabee Sanders want to finish her sentence? How dare she call them on their fake news? How dare the president tweet? How dare the president play ball with the American public, and his tweets are the ball that he's throwing over the heads of the mainstream media? That's why they're in a tizzy. That's why the mainstream media is hysterical, because Donald Trump has rendered them irrelevant. Sarah Huckabee Sanders is rendering them irrelevant. Communications Director Hope Hicks renders them irrelevant. This is a stellar comms team at the White House. And what I love most of all is that they're giving back to the left what the left has done to us for years. For years, the left has shoved fake news down our throats and expected us to accept it. And now Hicks and Sanders and President Trump are shoving it right back in their faces and demanding truth and demanding accountability. And the base loves this. I mean, whenever the president tweets, whenever Sarah Huckabee Sanders spanks somebody down at MSNBC or CNN or NBC, it's like an early Christmas present every day to the base. They simply adore it. And like I said, we're finally giving the left back what they've been giving us for years.
Yeah, absolutely. So let me just. Maybe they just still don't get it. But the mainstream media, what my good friend Andrew Sarabian calls the fake news industrial complex, yes, they don't understand one key issue. We have a president of the United States who doesn't care what the New York Times or CNN thinks about.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's the bottom line. And it's not just about the base. It's not just about the base. It's about Americans. The Americans know. It's like the election in Alabama that's just about to happen. The people of Alabama are going to decide what's best for Alabama.
That's right.
And they couldn't care what an editorial board in Manhattan thinks.
Look, you're 100% right. Donald Trump couldn't care less what the mainstream media thinks about him, but even better, I love the way he takes the wind out of their sails and he delegitimizes their elitist institutions like the White House Correspondents' Dinner, the Kennedy Center Honors. He realizes, hey, I'm the president of the United States. My appearance makes these events. And if you're going to insult me and roast me and bash me, I'm not going to sit through that. And tomorrow, while you guys go home and you're all upset that I didn't show up and you're all upset that you didn't get to zing me with your one-liners and you're all dejected, I'm still going to be the most powerful person in the world. And I made that event. And if you don't mind your manners, I'm not going to come next year and I'm not going to come the year after that. I adore that. You people have ever played the media as artistically and as strategically as Donald Trump does. I mean, it truly is a work of art. It's the only word I could think of. Truly is a work of art, the way he throws the liberal media off their game.
The elite, and I mean media, Hollywood, the swamp, the elite think they're America. Right. And along has come a man who's demonstrated to them, no, you're not America. And they just can't stand it. And it's just glorious to watch.
Oh, it is glorious to watch. It's outstanding to watch. I love it. I could literally watch Donald Trump beat up on the liberal media and liberal elitists night and day and never, never get bored. Seb, it is always an absolute pleasure. Always the most interesting segments with you. Thanks so much, my friend. We're going to do this again real soon.
I hope so. All the best. God bless.
You got it, my friend. Take care. I want to keep bringing you these analyses, so please subscribe to our premium service at www.therebel.media/shows. If you're already a subscriber, thanks very, very much. I will be back with you tomorrow. Thanks so much for watching.